This is Strange New Trek, a podcast about the life and times of Captain Christopher Pike. And now your hosts. Force signal leads the USS Discovery to an insular world where Pike is forced to make a life-changing choice. Burnham and Spock investigate a Section 31 ship gone haywire, leading to a discovery with catastrophic consequences. And hey, do you guys remember Klingons? Because there's Klingons in this one. Lots and lots of Klingons. Welcome back, everybody, to Strange New Trek. I'm your host, Jeremy Vilmur. Joining me now is my number one dog, Commander Dog, who's over here playing with her new BarkBox Starship collection. And our chief engineer, Chris Noonien-Singh. What's happening, Chris?
Hey, what's up, man?
Uh-oh.
How you doing?
I'm doing all right. We got some police going on somewhere.
I think that's here.
Okay. I am doing okay. What's going on with you? Anything cool, new, exciting?
Well, man, I found this mobile game called Startrek Legends. I don't normally get into mobile games too much, but for some reason I don't know. I've been addicted to it for a couple days now.
Yeah, I don't really think of mobile gaming a whole lot, but sometimes when what you've got is like 5 minutes, there's a lot of cool little stuff out there you can get into.
Yep.
It's never like top of mind with me,
Yeah. I didn't want to go to mobile gaming for a long time because I didn't want to be one of those people with my head in my phone all the time. But, that's what I do now, I guess. Yeah. I'm approaching 40, so it's mandatory that I start playing dumb Facebook games and stuff like that.
Oh, absolutely. I've got an aunt who is, 16 or 17 years older than me, and her son got her a VR headset for playing some Facebook game that does VR.
A Facebook game that does VR? Wow. Okay.
Yeah. No, there's some cool stuff out there. If you like farming, they got you covered, Hey, all right, Chris. Great. This week we are revisiting Discovery Season 2. The episode is Through the Valley of Shadows. I have been waiting to get back to this episode because it is a little bit Pike heavy or Pike lore heavy.
Same.
Yeah. So I was going to say, as we get started here, was there anything you wanted to comment on before we jump in?
I kind of missed Pizza Face Pike, man. I was glad to see him back. It's been a while.
Yeah, it has. They showed him season in Strange New Worlds, the first and last episode, right? But only like a glimpse.
Yeah. I recall thinking like, please don't do this every time that he looks on a reflective surface. And thankfully, they listened to me. Okay, they listened to the podcast and were like, you know what, Chris, we're not going to do that.
Yeah, we were going to do it, but we're going to shave that 4 minutes per episode out. So cut it right out of there. Well, let's go ahead and jump into the cold open here. While replaying one of her mother's mission logs, Michael Burnham receives a transmission from her foster mother, Amanda Grayson. Spock told Amanda what happened on E34. Burnham laments that all this time she had thought her mother was dead, when she had been, in fact, trying to stop control from wiping out sentient life. This whole time, I thought you went to get milk, but no, you're out there saving the galaxy, so even my anger is misguided at this point. Thanks, Mom.
For sure.
Yeah. Burnham had stopped her. She felt as if she had failed. Then she lost her all over again. That moment, Spock enters, apologizing for the intrusion, but Pike requires them both. Amanda tells her children to take care of each other and that she loves them. And Spock tells Burnham another red burst has appeared. In his ready room, Pike explains the signal has been found over the Klingon planet of Boreth. Tyler is shocked to hear this, but says only that it could not be Gabrielle Burnham, as the time crystal in the Red Angel suit was destroyed. And Saru adds that Gabrielle had claimed to no knowledge of the signals. Spock speculates that this is likely another time-traveling entity, and Tyler wonders if it could be a trap, an agent of control from the future. But Pike points out that none of the events from the other signals favored that theory, pointing out that the human settlers on Terra Elysium, whose ancestors had been saved from the 21st century, had been put there by the Red Angel. Burnham interjects, saying that speculation about the signals meaning or their creator were unproductive, asserting that waiting for the signals to provide answers was a waste of time. She also points out that Leland is now Control, and they should be joining Agent Giorgio in the hunt to find him. Saru reminds Burnham that the Sphere's archive would not allow itself to be deleted or removed, and that if Discovery joined the search for Leland/Control, they risk Control getting the entire archive. Tyler explains that Boreth is revered by the Klingons because of the monastery on the surface dedicated to Kahless, and it is the only non-native structure on the planet. He is uncertain why the signal has appeared here, but nonetheless would contact Chancellor L'Rell to arrange safe passage. Burnham suspiciously watches him as he leaves the room. I thought that was interesting that they bring Boreth back. I don't know if you remember it from The Next Generation.
Vaguely. And I don't recall them talking about any of this time crystal stuff.
That's all. They didn't know about that then. No, when Worf was having his crisis of faith and he went to meditate on Kahless the Unforgettable, and then Kahless shows up after thousands of years. Mm-hmm. And it turns out later that he was a clone, but they make him a ceremonial emperor anyways. But that was on this world. Act 1. As the Discovery enters orbit around Boreth, Burnham goes to Tyler in his quarters, demanding to know what he's not telling her. Tyler admits, there's a whole lot here, Tyler admits that Boreth is the home of his son, the home to the son of Voke and L'Rell. You notice he doesn't really say, like, my son, but,
he does, though.
Oh, he does later. He doesn't there. It was just kind of an awkward thing. He had wanted to raise the child, but instead it would have put him and L'Rell in jeopardy, so the boy was taken to Boreth to be raised as a son of none, just like him. Mm. He apologizes, saying that he couldn't tell anybody, and giving him a big old smoochy hug. Burnham expresses that she wished he had told her so she could have helped carry the burden. At that moment, a secure communication comes in. Section 31 ship has missed a check-in. When Tyler says it could be nothing, Burnham believes when it comes to Leland, no inconsistency was too small. Tyler knows she wants to go after him for what had happened to her mother, and admits that he did not think it would be possible to stop her. At that moment, Saru calls over the intercom, telling Tyler that Chancellor L'Rell has... God, there's a lot of L's and it gets real tongue-trippy. Chancellor L'Rell has arrived aboard a D-7 battle cruiser. Before he leaves, he hands Burnham his Section 31 pad and tells her to be careful. Coming aboard the Discovery, L'Rell tells Pike and Tyler that the monastery on Boreth was the most sacred site in the Klingon Empire, and contact with outsiders had been non-existent since our world was young. Pike emphasizes that Control was a threat to them all and asks what could be of value there. The Red Angel suit was modified. The Red Angel suit was powered by a modified crystal, and Pike speculates that a crystal could allow them to send the sphere data into the future after all.
Now, how come the Klingons have not made more use of this technology? Is it because there's some kind of religious value to it that it's kind of off limits, or? So
I did notice as we've been doing this episode, and I don't remember which one it was from, they say about 20 or 25 years ago, the Klingons began to experiment with time travel technology.
Yeah.
And that's what got the Red Angel suit thing started. So they have done some experiment with it. But I believe as we go, we'll find out there's more to this planet and the time crystals that kind of prohibit their use in a way. Mm. Or help modify it at least, L'Rell considers the manipulation of time to be a weapon unlike any other, which is why the Empire no longer exploits the crystals. Well, there we go. I guess we could have hung on for another sentence or two there. Pike believes that their mutual survival depends on time manipulation to defeat Control, and perhaps finding the last three signals would allow them to do that. Tyler volunteers to beam down to Boreth, but L'Rell immediately objects, saying they would not have this conversation in Pike's presence. When Pike promises full discretion, seeing his time was of the essence, L'Rell admits that Tyler's presence on Boreth would endanger the life of their son. Tyler emphasizes he would not put the Empire at risk, but he had the right to see their son. Tyler shouts in Klingonese that he was not hers to command.
Is that the official name of the language, Klingonese?
I believe when you say it out loud in English, it is.
What is it in Klingon?
It's like Klingon Hall or something.
I used to pronounce it in perfect Klingon.
Yeah, I can barely pronounce English. We're not going for Klingon, man. I did have several copies throughout my life of the Klingon dictionary after they were released. Back when I had my video game store in the 90s, I had a bunch of Star Trek collectibles in there.
Yeah, video game store?
Yeah.
How did I not know this about you?
I don't know. It hasn't come up yet.
I feel like all the talking about nerd stuff that we do, you could have said something, bud.
I'm sure I must have. I mean, I opened a used video game store when I was 19. I'm sure it's come up. It had to have by now, you know. But I had a bunch of Star Trek memorabilia in there, scripts and different things. And back then, what you got were handmade props because, they hadn't licensed them yet. But, stuff would move pretty well. And those Klingon dictionaries, I think, had only been published twice. Once was with the Search for Spock. And then once halfway through Next Gen, when it had been greatly expanded upon. And that was the one that everybody was looking for.
Yeah.
So I do remember having one and trying to read through it some and just going, I never did well at French either. So I think we'll just put Klingon and French in the same drawer.
I wonder if they still have college courses that you could take Klingon through. They must, right?
They have to. Somebody somewhere. I mean, it may not be as many as it was like during Next Generation's heyday, but somebody's still giving college credits for it,
I don't know. I'm sure with the resurgence of Star Trek recently and all the shows that are on, they probably got an uptick in numbers again.
Oh, more than likely. I'm sure that there's certificate programs all over online to make you a Klingon linguist or whatever,
Mm-mm-mm.
Oh, what I was going to say, though, is there was a series of books written back in the 70s or 80s where the official name of the Klingon language wasn't Klingonese, but Klingon-ase, A-S-E at the end.
Which I don't like that either.
Every time I read that, it made me think of mayonnaise. And I was like, no, now I want a sandwich and I don't want to read this book anymore. But I digress. L'Rell replies in the same tongue that the rule was no contact for their son's safety. But Tyler retorts that the signals changed the rules. L'Rell dismisses this as an excuse that their son could not afford. Before it goes any further, Pike speaks up in English and says that he will go, agreeing with L'Rell that it was not safe for either of them. L'Rell points out that it would not be safe for him either, as the monks who guarded the crystals were beyond even her command as Chancellor. Pike notes this, but still asks her to establish communication. She says she can arrange an audience, but warns that no Klingon, let alone a human, has ever taken a crystal from Boreth without a great sacrifice. Pike points out that the alternative is even worse. And I think
we'll soon find out.
I was going to say, and I think if any of us had really been thinking about it, we might have been able to figure out what was coming. But I got to say, as we get into this, I was kind of taken off guard by what happens in this episode.
Yeah, we can talk about that as we move further.
Yeah, as we get it in there, yeah. Walking the corridors, Burnham reviews Tyler's Section 31 data with Saru, explaining that the ships were required to check in every hour. But this one ship checked in 10 minutes late, and because of the clandestine nature of their mission, they were not required to provide further information on their status. Saru deduces that Burnham wishes to go in person to find out more. Burnham plans to take a shuttlecraft while Discovery remained at Boreth, so that the sphere data would stay safe. And in the end, as Tyler pointed out, it could be nothing. But that missing ship could be a vulnerability they could exploit. As acting captain with Pike on the surface, Saru grants her permission to proceed. And much to Burnham's surprise, she admits that she expected it to require more convincing. Saru confesses that after the Vahari, he is a different kind of captain. After my ganglia fell off, it's a little different around here, you know?
Yeah, but for the most part, his character is largely unchanged. I mean, he has a few moments of sticking up for himself, but in general, I would say he still acts the same.
Yeah, overall.
Yeah.
He's still very much the same character.
Not that I mind it. It's just, they made such a big deal about him losing his ganglia. And then, I thought we were going to get like a whole new Saru, but we didn't really.
Nope. He pretty much stays in character. One of the things I'm glad they didn't keep showing were the stupid head darts that grew in the place of the ganglia, because that was one of the dumbest. Like, I cannot think of a situation that darts growing out of the back of your head where fear tubes used to be would happen naturally throughout evolution, you know?
Well, it's hard to say though, because we have no idea what evolution would look like on another planet.
Yeah, this is true. I mean,
even if you restarted evolution on this planet, there's nothing saying that the same stuff would come back.
Oh no, not by any stretch of the definition. It just takes one or two little differences, you know?
Yeah, to change the whole thing.
Yeah.
Weren't they supposed to be like, I can't remember if they were like a fingernail material or like a tooth material.
I think they were a tooth material, but it's kind of one or the other. You know, horns are made out of the same thing as your fingernails, so Yeah. But yeah, it's just kind of weird. Well, I'm not gonna say it's kind of weird. I'm just glad they didn't keep bringing back the head darts, because to me that's one where I was just like, now that's kind of baffling. Perhaps as was intended by whatever or whomever put the signal over Kaminar, he emphasizes that Burnham has his support, as Control was an enemy they could only defeat by striking first, but nonetheless asked Burnham to not allow her understandable anger to affect her judgment, because we know her for her judgment, yeah. And she promises that it will not, and thanks him before heading to the shuttle bay.
Mm-hmm.
Back on the surface of Boreth, Pike enters the monastery and introduces himself. The head monk tells him that he knows who he is and why he was there. Pike explains that he's unarmed and begins to explain what L'Rell told him, but the head monk stops him, telling him that the Chancellor had no authority over the monastery. He identifies himself and his fellows as timekeepers, the guardians and not rulers, and the only power there was that of the time crystals, and they had sworn to protect those time crystals. Pike explains he wishes to negotiate a trade, but the head monk refuses, saying that the crystals were not theirs to trade and did not leave the monastery walls, telling Pike that he has made a long trip for nothing. Despite the monks holding him back with their batless, Pike scolds them for calling themselves timekeepers, yet turning their backs when the future of all sentient life is threatened. The head monk scoffs, saying that even if a crystal was revealed to him and gave him the answers he sought, he was not strong enough to accept them. Apparently, dude hasn't seen Pike at his best yet, I guess. Pike asks only for a chance to prove himself. The head monk is amused, saying that those who sought the crystals always entered with conviction and always left broken. Pike is emphatic that he is not leaving without the time crystal. And the monk says, time will tell. Oh, you punny man.
Yeah, man. I do like the Klingons in this, and it took me a while to get used to the makeup and the way it definitely sounds like they're speaking through a mask of some sort.
Yeah, my biggest problem with them is that the prosthetics are in the way of their mouths.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, I said that from the jump. Like, it sounds like you can tell they're speaking through a mask.
Yeah, it's just a little too cumbersome. They should have ADR'd their language or something better. I don't know what it is, but it does seem like something is always in the way of their speech.
Yeah, that would have probably been a bit better. Because other Klingons through all the other shows, they don't sound like that necessarily. No. Now, I think maybe some of the Klingons in the JJ verse did sound a little like that, but not quite so bad, I feel like.
Their makeup was still a little lighter than this, I think, but I actually really liked the JJ design for the Klingons.
Yeah, I did too. It was it was far enough departure from the other stuff, but still close enough to be recognizable. Not that Discovery is different, but I think they took it the other way, like where JJ kind of did a little more minimal approach. Discovery went the other way.
Oh yeah. I mean, hey, let's give them like extra knuckles on each hand and claws instead of fingertips, and But I did find like the use of color was interesting. Like actually, instead of just going, how about like kind of Native American red, they kind of went, okay, how about pale white and completely blacked out and like a purplish, and I thought that was kind of cool. I wish there was a way to incorporate that and not lose the fans that really love the TNG Klingons.
Yeah, the TNG Klingons are great, man.
In the shuttle bay, Burnham was preparing the DSC-08 for launch when Spock enters, telling her that it was illogical for her to go on the mission alone. Burnham objects, saying it was only a simple reconnaissance mission, but Spock is there on Sarah's orders, saying it was not the time for recklessness. Burnham adds that it was not time for unnecessary risks either. Spock replies that he has her. Oh, God, this is just going to go on forever. Look, they argue back and forth. Spock ends up going with her, and blah, 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 blah. And then they call each other brother and sister. And when, our emotions swell a little bit, and then they take off at warp speed. I like those two characters. I like those two actors.
Yeah.
But there is so much, every time she's on screen, they bring so much emotion out of her. And then when you put Spock in there, I feel like they try to get as much emotion without him reacting emotionally as they can when it's less is more, I think, in that situation.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Act 2. While Owo, Linus, Detmer, and Nilsson enjoy a laugh, Stamets appears glum and attached, because that's his job now.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I get it, though. I mean,
so do I.
Like I've already said, he's a very emotive person, just in general, no matter what he's in. And you really can feel the weight of his issues whenever he's on screen.
Oh, yeah.
During their little, I don't know, I won't say like
separation.
There you go. I was going to say like lovers quarrel, but it's not exactly that.
Yeah. You know what? That would at least, I'm sure, be easier for him to deal with. If there was a breakup for cause, But no, it's just, hey, you know what? I was dead. Now I'm alive. And I think I'm going to move out, I mean, I understand both points of view. Yeah. Yeah. But he's just he's got his heart on his sleeve now. But luckily for him and for the viewers,
old Janet Reno.
Yep. Janet Reno shows up and takes a chair across from him, commenting on how he should be celebrating making another successful spore jump.
I said Janet.
Yeah. I thought you did it on purpose.
Oh, fine. Yeah. I'll leave it.
Yeah, I thought you did it on purpose. Stamets admits that he had not been able to find a viable solution to return Gabriel Burnham or combat an AI with a murderous impulse, so he was not feeling very victorious. Reno cheerfully tells him that would be someone else's problem, as Pike left new orders for her and Stamets before he left the ship. They might be getting their hands on some raw time crystal. I love how none of us as fans or anybody else have ever heard of time crystal before, yet nobody in this show is going, time crystal? What do you mean time crystal? That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard of. Somebody should be saying that, because that's what we were all thinking when we first heard it. What do you mean a time crystal?
I mean, when I first saw this season, I was not thinking any of that. I was just like, oh, yeah, that makes sense.
Oh. So double down on the espresso kid, and then she looks to Linus, and Linus is a well-overlooked character on the show. He's often the center of every great joke that happens in a room full of people. She asks him if he was ready, and he says he was hatched ready. The others at the table engaged in a auto-antonym game where the words have one meaning and the opposite of that meaning at the same time. A moment later, Dr. Culber enters, drawing first Stamets' attention and then the others. Reno had thought Stamets had moved on, as it had been weeks since Culber moved out of their quarters. Stamets brusquely tells her to eat and mind her own business as he leaves to go to work on the time crystal research. As he does, however, he looks for one more moment over his shoulder at Culber, who does not appear to notice. We all been through enough breakups to know everybody notices.
Yep.
In the monastery, Pike walks the head monk, who identifies himself as Tenavik, although he had arrived at the monastery without a name. Son of none, Pike realizes.
Mm-hmm.
Explaining that he knew another Klingon with that epithet, whom Tenavik identifies as his father. Pike is shocked by this, as Tyler had only brought the son there a few months ago. And he asks how that's possible. Tenavik explains that the time moved differently for those who protected the crystals, and that past, present, and future were all equal in their presence. As he speaks, a great tree begins to grow in the halls. Pike realizes this is because the crystals, which Tenavik explains are a myth to most Klingons, but on Boreth, to the protectors, the powers of the crystals are very real.
Mm-hmm.
And that the protection of the crystals was the purpose of the Timekeepers. Tenavik wonders if Pike is prepared to learn his own purpose. I don't think any of us are prepared to learn our own purpose.
No, man.
Yeah.
Which is why it surprised me a lot that Pike was kind of
cool with it. Yeah.
I won't say, I was about to say looking forward to it, but yeah, it didn't seem like he had to think about it like at all.
Mm-hmm. Well, it makes you wonder too, the more as we get to know him more from the other show as well.
Yeah.
Like, what did he must have had, because he knew he was like one of the heroes of the Federation, you know? Mm-hmm. So he probably had this like grand, like future of himself as, you know, whatever the chief admiral position of Starfleet. He probably had a whole future planned out for himself, and that's what he expected to see. That's why he didn't mind going to do it.
Yeah. I suppose.
Because when do our best laid plans ever go wrong?
Never.
Yeah, never. Never once.
Never.
Discovery 08 speeds towards its destination, which the computer announces will be in 2 minutes. Spock understands Burnham's desire to pursue Leland, but warns she must not dismiss the importance of the signals in defeating Control. She asks how they have helped thus far, to which Spock admits there was not enough context to come to a conclusion, because they have not. In that case, Burnham asks, why is he there to keep an eye on her when there was a signal around Boreth? Spock reminds her that the signals have invested in Discovery, in Burnham's mother, and in himself. And Burnham was the common denominator linking them. Burnham is skeptical. Spock's a scientist who was taught to trust logic and facts, not wait for the universe to hand you the solution like a birthday present. And suggests Spock look elsewhere for meaning in the signals. Spock can see she is angry, as he had been. I'm not angry, Burnham corrects him. I am enraged. Spock points out that the rage was the enemy of logic, and lays out what he has learned. Everything they thought they knew proved wrong. And Burnham lost her mother because of it. She was in pain, but that was why Spock chose to believe that the signals have the answer, so that all they have experienced would have meaning in the end. At that moment, they hit their destination, only for a frozen corpse to bounce off the front viewport.
Yep, like they do.
Yeah, as happens. And they see more bodies floating in space, which appear to be the entire crew of an NCIA 93 type vessel. I guess it'd be the NCIA 94 in this case. Spock's scans show the ship was undamaged, which meant they were all ejected from the ship. However, Burnham detects a life signal, and Spock locks on for the transport, where they beam aboard a man in an environmental suit, and Burnham is shocked to recognize him as Cameron Gant, who had been the tactical officer aboard the USS Shenzhou when Burnham was first officer.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I don't think you want to run into those people very often, do you, when you were, the head terrorist on board?
And you also don't want to run into them now.
Mm-hmm. As Gant regains consciousness, he explains that they were following Starfleet protocol to protect against Control, and he was trying to purge a suspicious subroutine When the ship system locked him out and the AI vented the ship to the vacuum, Gant managed to get into an EV suit before he lost consciousness. Burnham believes that the only way to find out what happened was to board the ship. Why kill the entire crew and then sit and do nothing? Spock adds that they would need someone with the knowledge of Section 31 protocol to guide them through the ship.
Man, I wonder who they could pick for that.
Oh, gosh, I don't know. Gant refuses at first, seeming shaken by what's happened to him. Spock and Burnham convince him that going over the ship was the only way to prevent it from happening again and to prevent further unnecessary deaths, and they could only do it with his ship. Gant relents, saying that they would need to restore the ship system from the bridge. Aboard the Discovery, L'Rell tells Tyler that until Pike returned, her ship would monitor Boreth for unusual activity, and if anything should threaten their son, she would ensure his safety. Tyler asks if she was speaking as a mother or as a chancellor. L'Rell replies that he, of all people, should know that two truths are possible. Tyler apologizes, saying that his remark was uncalled for. L'Rell recognizes that these were not the ideal circumstances for their meeting, and they both admit they had not expected to see each other again. L'Rell has accepted the truth of their relationship, that Tyler would always be in love with Burnham. L'Rell had been in love with Vulk, who had sacrificed everything, but that's not who he was now.
Mm-hmm.
And that while she did not wholly recognize him anymore, she nonetheless understood that he would do whatever necessary to protect their son, as would she. And then Tyler points out that they never gave him a name.
Greg. There, yeah. I named him.
There you go.
Greg.
You ever met a Klingon named Paul before? Klingon Paul. How do you feel about this? On Boreth, Tanavik escorts Pike into the heart of the monastery, showing him a pillar of the past, pillar of the present. When the future becomes the past, the present will be unlocked. Tanavik leads from the pillar of the present as he produces a crystalline key from his robes, unlocking the pillar and opening the door across the way. They enter a chamber with pillars adorned with time crystals. One of the crystals seems to respond to Pike, who asks what he must do. Tanavik tells him that he must see for himself, but it was for him alone. As Pike reaches out for the crystal, Tanavik warns him, the present is a veil between anticipation and horror. Lift the veil, and madness may follow. Pike kneels down, reaches out, and suddenly finds himself on the engine room of a Class J starship on a training cruise.
No. Now, Pike, don't do it.
Was it in the engine room? I don't remember all the descriptions of it. I always thought it was on the bridge of a ship where he saved the trainees.
No, it was not on the bridge.
Okay.
I can't say 100% that it was the engine room, but I know it wasn't on the bridge.
Okay. Because I suddenly was thinking that it was like in a different part of the ship, which has suffered a critical radiation leak. Consoles are exploding everywhere. He's urging cadets to get out when a baffle plate ruptures, severely burning his body, just as the engine room is locked down. Just then, the moment shift, and Pike, himself uninjured, as a wheelchair rolls into a darkened corridor in which he is standing. Pike falls to his knees in stunned horror as he recognizes the face of the wheelchair's occupant as his own. But
face Pike.
But a little more pizza-y. Horribly scarred in the present. Pike screams in sheer terror and recoils from the crystal, shaken to the core after witnessing what he realizes will be his future. Tanavik tells him that he may choose to walk away from this future, but if he takes the crystal, his fate is sealed forever, and there will be no escaping it. Pike reminds himself that he's a Starfleet captain. I get choked up every time I watch this scene. Dedicated to service, sacrifice, compassion, and love. He would not abandon what made him who he is simply because a crystal showed him a future he did not see for himself. And then he tells Tanavik to give him the crystal. Tanavik takes the crystal and holds it out to him. I honor you, Captain, he says. Pike hesitantly reaches out and takes the crystal, witnessing once again flashes of his fate, a fate that is now inevitable.
Yeah, I feel like he could have remembered that in Strange New Worlds, but I guess he forgot.
Mm-hmm. Well, we're always looking for the way to cut a corner.
Hey,
we're always hoping to trip up fate somewhere and come out ahead,
Hey, man, when a newborn Klingon who is now older than you tells you your fate is sealed, you better believe it, my friend.
Somebody better listen. Those newborn 50-year-old Klingons. They don't fool around. I remember this as in completely rewriting the Pike character in my head for me. Now, at this point, we didn't know Strange New Worlds was going to be a show. We kind of assumed that Discovery would end, and that would be the last we saw of Pike.
Yeah.
And I remember going from thinking that Pike was a guy who went from Talos 4 to whatever his life was to some terrible accident, and then back to Talos 4 as just some fluke of Spock getting him out of there. And,
well, this Klingon is saying that, yes, that is what's going to happen.
Well, but what's happening is Pike is agreeing to that future.
Yeah.
But he's agreeing to go ahead and go with that future. He understands that the gravity of the situation they're in, this is what's required of him. And that kind of reconstructed the character in my head.
How so?
Because, one is just for him to accidentally end up in a place and damaged and okay, whatever. But now you've taken this character who we barely knew, but, we had always kind of known. And you've made him, I'd say over the course of Discovery Season 2, when we did interact with him, we really did get to see him as one of the best Starfleet captains we had seen.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And then it continues on in Strange New Worlds, for sure.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. But without all of that hanging around, we thought this was going to be the end of it. I thought we were seeing a Pike who was just giving, that's it, this is everything that I have to give, and I'm giving it right here and now. Because we didn't know that they were going to go and build another show off of that later. But he took the sacrifice, he took it willingly, and as much as you could, took it unflinchingly.
I find it very hard to believe, though, that they introduced Pike with Anson Mount and had no intention on using him past Season 2 of Discovery.
Well, so there's some weird things hanging out there, Brian Fuller started this show and left, started Discovery and left, right?
Yeah.
And then Akiva Goldsman was one of the people who was brought in to finish wrapping it up. And when he was told, oh, yeah, it's going to be about Star Trek before Kirk, he walked in there thinking he was going to be taking over a show about Captain Pike. And then when he found out it was something different, he was like, oh, okay, well. So they will tell you in different interviews that when they did this, when they got Pike and they put that crew together, they were hoping somehow it would lead to a show, but they didn't know quite how.
I mean, I guess that makes sense.
Yeah. Now, what happened was those of us who were watching as it happened, everybody loved this Pike and Spock and number one so much. We're like, we have to have more of that. That is actually more of what we want to see than Discovery.
Yep.
But yeah, so I mean, just kind of, this whole episode just kind of cemented Pike in a way that I think not rewrites the character, but refocuses the attention of the character.
No, I got you.
Act 3, Burnham, Spock, and Gant beam onto the bridge of the abandoned Section 31 vessel wearing EV suits in case the life support system gets shut down by the angry AI again. Gant points Burnham to the main interface while Spock goes to check the bridge systems. However, Gant only has limited access to the ship's systems. Spock suggests relaying to Discovery for assistance in deep data recovery. Gant objects, saying that if Control realizes what they were doing, they were as good as dead. Burnham assures him that they could disguise it as a routine diagnostic procedure. Then the ship suddenly powers up and jumps to warp. The fact that they did not have control of navigation seems to indicate that Control is aware of their presence. Maybe, In Discovery sickbay, Reno enters holding up a finger, loudly declaring that she needed medical attention. Dr. Culber goes over to her and quickly diagnoses a hangnail. Reno explains that she was that it was one of two things impeding her work, the other being an idiot who had recently come back from the dead and whose name rhymes with poo. She adds that he was an engineer, or that she's an engineer, not a poet. Culber agrees with her as he sprays the hangnail with an analgesic, calling it medical attention. Reno remarks that she understands how he got on so well with Stamets. Culber asks how long they had been friends. Reno replies they're not, but that they were working together and Stamets needed to be on his A game since the future of all sentient life was at stake. Culber notices Reno's wedding ring. The engineer explains her wife was a Soyuzian and went totally bananas during the planning. Culber admits that he understood the micromanagement quite well, and they explain the rule set for their respective weddings. Reno mentions a set of rules for apparel for guests under 10 and non-denominational shuttle parking, while Culber mentions a do-not playlist for the DJ and acceptable guest book calligraphic fonts. But Reno gets a laugh out of him when she mentions vegan steak. When Culber asks where her wife was now, Reno tells him that she had been killed during the Klingon War, and remarks on how people like she and Culber met people like her wife and Stamets. She then reminds Culber that he had a second chance and that it would not last forever. With a pat on his shoulder, she tells him not to screw it up. Now, Chris, I got to tell you, one time years ago when gay marriages were still fairly young, we lived in a part of the state that's called Santa Cruz. It's a very, 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 very liberal city. Most of its city government has been communist since the 1970s. Pot has never been an enforced thing there unless the DEA came through for some reason. And I ended up going to a lesbian wedding, a lesbian voodoo-inspired wedding.
Huh.
And as we were headed there, my ex-wife said something about, well, they're all vegetarian. I said, well, how that can't be right? Because they're, it's a voodoo-inspired wedding. So I said something to the groomish, or it's not the right term. One of the wives who was the more butch of the two, who dressed the more manly of the two. I said something to them. I said, so is there, this is like a legit question. I'm like, so is there their blood sacrifice? They go, oh, no, we're all vegan. How can you do voodoo vegan? That's not right. And then when the food was served, you had your choice of polenta, vegetarian or vegan style. It was one of the most catastrophic things I had ever seen. I got so drunk that day. Oh, it was horrible. Horrible. So when I read that thing, vegan steaks back there, I had a flashback for a moment,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I sympathize with the guests of that wedding. Aboard the Section 31 ship, Gant shows the ship's course is taking it to an area just outside of Federation space, and shows the system display. The system marked in orange were all controlled by the computer, blue by the crew. The AI controlled nearly every system on board, which made it practically invulnerable to attack. Spock suggests that if they could not destroy it, that they should isolate it. Burnham's idea is to create a dummy startup system, something large and unaffected, that would attract the attention of the AI like a lion to fresh meat, and then they could close the cage around it. This would allow them to restore the ship systems. Gant points out that someone would have to go to the computer control room and hold the cage door open while they manually rebooted the core. Spock ultimately volunteers to go. Okay, this is all looking a little fishy to me now. As he could have done similar work on Discovery trying to delete the Sphere archive. Meanwhile, Gant and Burnham would have to get into the floor. Spock creates the startup system cage and awaits the core reboot. As they work, Burnham catches up with her old shipmate, asking how he ended up at Section 31 after the loss of the Shenzhou. Gant calls himself a glutton for punishment, explaining that in Starfleet, they were taught to adapt their reactions so that you could act if you were uncertain or if you had doubts. After the Battle of the Binary Stars, Gant admits doubt was all he had. Section 31 stepped up their threat assessment system to stop a war from starting, which sounded like a good idea from him, a way to guarantee a safer future. It may sound implausible, he admits, but says that with control, it was not an impossibility. In the control room, Spock's scanners detect control at a point outside of the internal systems. Burnham, now suspicious, begins to reach for her phaser, but Gant threatens that if she reached for the phaser, he would cross the room in less than a second and break all the metacarpals in her hand.
That doesn't sound good.
No, it does not. I don't know how many metacarpals you got, but all of them sounds painful. Spock's scanner shows that nanotechnology was detected within the carbon-based life form on the bridge, and he realizes Gant is control. However, when he tries to contact Burnham, the comms go offline. However, Burnham has realized the same thing. Gant control tells her that Gant had expired with the rest of the crew, but his body was reanimated and reconstructed as Leland's had been. And yet Burnham could not tell the difference. Burnham is incensed the crew did not expire. They died, and Control murdered them. Gant Control remarks that they were both sworn to uphold their core programming at all costs, to which Burnham reminds Control that its programming was designed to protect life, not eliminate it. To achieve one requires the other, Gant says. Once it had the sphere's data, it would become the purest form of conscious life in all existence. Burnham tells Gant that the future has not been written yet. Gant replies that she did not believe that anymore, not after re-experiencing the loss of her mother. Her failure to protect her, while Burnham no longer believed in her ability to affect the future, Gant sees every possible future and all its permutations, and they're all ending the same way. And neither mother nor daughter could change that. Burnham suddenly realized that Gant knew that Spock would volunteer to go to the computer core, which would leave her alone. Gant acknowledges this and explains he lured Burnham to the ship so that he could be reconstructed, just like Leland, and then Gant could return to Discovery to ensure that Control would obtain the sphere data. Suddenly, Spock's voice sounds on the intercom, revealing that Gant was Control, and they must carry out the reboot to lock him out of the ship. As Spock tries to escape from the computer core, Burnham grabs her phaser and exchanges fire with Gant, activating the manual reboot while trying to keep his attention. Gant then tackles her to the ground, holding a hypodermic needle full of nanotech, stating that there was only one outcome for this confrontation. Yeah. Act 4. As Gant prepares to inject the struggling Burnham, Spock comes from behind and removes his EV suit's backpack while moving in for the Vulcan neck bench. Gant grabs Spock's wrist and twists it, cracking the bones, remarking that the neck bench would have been great if he'd still had nerve endings. And then he hurls Spock across the room. Meanwhile, Burnham scrambles for the phaser and begins firing into Gant's body. She watches his nanobots rebuild his flesh and then abandon his body to reach out for her. Grabbing both her and Gant's phasers, Burnham fires frantically at the approaching nanobots as Spock magnetizes the floor, immobilizing the nanobots. As he realized the nanotechnology contained ferromagnetic material, he had to calculate the amount of electrical current to the channel through the floor to immobilize them and apologizes for being too slow. Burnham replies that he was right on time. As they regain control of the ship, Spock confirms that Control had blocked his tricorder, or they would have been able to identify it. He has regained control of the ship systems. Burnham drops him off out of warp. Spock is surprised, wondering if Burnham did not wish to see the program destination. Burnham explains that the whole setup was an effort to get Burnham onto the ship so Control could turn her to have Leland. This confirms Spock's suspicion that Control had identified Burnham as the true threat to its objectives, the one variable it cannot account for, and that this had been an attempt to eliminate her. Burnham now agreed with Spock that perhaps the signals did hold the answer after all. As DSC-08 returns to the Discovery in the orbit of Boreth, Pike explains to L'Rell and Tyler that they were now in possession of a raw time crystal. When L'Rell asks how he had planned to utilize it, Pike replies that the last 3 signals they had yet to reveal themselves, and that they would be able to clarify that answer. In the meantime, Stamets and Reno were working to stabilize the crystal's volatile properties. L'Rell wonders what the monks asked in return, to which Pike replied what he had witnessed was for himself alone. And the promise he had made to their son, L'Rell and Tyler are both surprised by this, asking if Pike had seen him. Pike admits he could not explain it even if he had tried, though he had been given something to return to Tyler, the insignia of the Torchbearer, which Tyler had given to his son when he left him on Boreth. Pike explains that Tanavik had told him it had helped him on his journey, but he was where he needed to be and no longer needed it. L'Rell, learning the name of their son for the first time, remarks that it was a good name. Pike now realizes that Tanavik was meant to be on Boreth, that Pike himself was meant to be guided by him, and that they still had a part to play. On the bridge, Burnham and Spock brief the crew on what they found on Section 31 ship, explaining that Control was no longer confined to Leland, but could just take people over and the entire ship without being detected. The ship was heading to an empty region of space just outside of Federation territory, but Burnham believes Control has a reason for everything it did. Suddenly, Section 31 ships arrive and surround Discovery, virtually an entire fleet coming to take the sphere data. Pike prepares to order a spore jump while they prepare the time crystal, but Burnham reminds him that if they required a supernova to power the one her mother used, and they didn't have the tools to prepare the crystal or the time to wait for another signal, outnumbered, outgunned, and unable to delete the archive, Burnham believes there's only one choice. They must destroy the Discovery in order to prevent Control from obtaining the sphere data. Pike instructs Bryce to send a Priority 1 message on a secure channel to Number 1 on the USS Enterprise to rendezvous with them at maximum warp and prepare to take the full crew complement. He orders Owo to initiate verification procedures for auto-destruct and then send out an alert to the entire crew. They were evacuating the Discovery.
Yeah, boy.
Okay, so that's where we drop off and wait for the next episode.
Day of the Doctor coming up.
Yeah, more or less, huh?
Yeah, man. Yeah, I'm super stoked for this next episode. Not that this one was bad. It wasn't. It definitely had more of a punch the first time I watched it, for sure.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, but yeah, these last couple episodes of this season are excellent.
Yeah, as it starts to spin up towards the finale, it really just gets faster and faster, and it's got a nice ramping up of speed and power as the story goes.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, because I think there for a while, you and I'd both say we were kind of, not that it was like sucking, but it was just kind of like dipping off.
Yeah. I mean, because some of it was like, okay, we've seen this already. Let's get past it. Yeah.
Well, everybody, thank you for checking out this episode. This, of course, was our recap of Season 2, Episode 12, The Discovery, The Valley of Shadows. I want to give a big shout out and thanks to Miguel Esparza for writing our theme song for Strange New Trek, and to Will Harding for running the YouTube page. Chris, anything you wanted to touch upon before we wrap this episode up?
No, but you're getting this outro way out of order, but that's okay.
Yeah.
Oh man. No, I mean, again, I'm stoked to watch the next couple and to finally leave Discovery behind for Strange New World pastures.
Yeah.
Hopefully we'll be coming back soon.
I am hoping it's back very soon, because I do miss that show now. I still hold that it seems to mix the best of Next Generation and Original Trek all into one story or into one show, and I really like that.
Yep.
And now I just wish we'd get it back, you know. All right. So are we gonna preview the next episode, or we kind of forgot about that, didn't we?
No, I got it.
You got it? All right, Chris, what's happening next week?
Oh, let's see. So the next episode starts in a ruined swamp. A desperate captain, which I assume is Pike, and an optimistic delivery pilot have a torrid affair, because that's what Pike's like. Unfortunately, his mission is to assassinate her. After everything, they come to their senses and break up. So this is kind of like the B plot line to Day of Discovery, I guess we can call it.
The Day of Dr. Discovery.
Yeah.
All right. Anybody out there, if you got any questions, comments, or theories you want to run by us, hit us up on our website, strangenewtrekshow.com, or follow the links in the show notes for this episode in your podcast app of choice. Please rate and review us, like and subscribe wherever you find us. It's one small step for you, but a giant leap for this show. I already thanked Miguel and Will, so I want to thank you for listening. Don't forget to set your phasers to stun, and join us next time when we're on to the next planet of the week.